Well, folks, it's another card review, and this time a hero card for Shaman, and it's a totally insane one. Brukan of the Elements, 8 mana hero card for Shaman. Battlecry, call upon the power of 2 elements. What does that mean? Is this Captain Planet? Hero power also says call upon a different element every turn. Well, it's kind of like a Kalamos of old. There are 4 elemental effects. You can deal 2 damage to all enemy minions, summon 2/3 elementals with taunt, deal 6 damage to the enemy hero, or restore 6 health to all friendly characters. Those are your 4 choices: lightning, earth, fire, and water. So, reminiscent of old Kalamos, but, changes to the effects. And the way this works is when you play BRU'KAN, the hero card, you're going to get all 4 of these are going to pop up. You're going to pick one. Then you're going to get to choose again, but you won't get to choose the same one. So you can't double up. You can't summon 4 elementals with taunt or deal 12 damage to the enemy hero, but you could summon some elementals and deal 6 to the enemy hero. So you've got to kind of pick your 2, and that's potentially going to be a pretty swingy play. Board clear, face damage if needed, some healing in a pinch. And then your hero power is basically going to become each of those elemental effects, but for 2 mana. And it's going to randomly cycle. Now, the first hero power, the turn you play Brukan, will be from the 2 leftover effects, we're told. So if you pick, deal 6 and summon some elementals with taunt, then you might get, restore 6 health, because it's going to be one that you didn't already use. So the first turn you play, you'll get 3 effects, essentially, if you have that extra 2 mana for your hero power. And then after that, it'll just randomly cycle through these, Dr. Boom, Mad Genius used to do in the past. Now, looking at these pretty clearly, each of these hero powers is insane for 2 mana. The healing is probably the worst, but it's still very efficient. But, you've got essentially board clear here, some crazy summon value off these taunts, could really stall out your opponents, slow down a game, or just burst damage, right? Just getting 6 to the face every few turns, maybe every other turn if you're super lucky, could really help you end games. So all in all, a lot of value packed here into Brukan, but also I think some interesting finisher potential, just because there is a way to get some significant damage here out of this card as well. And if it was just value, I'd be worried about Brukan's success rate. I'd be afraid, most decks are just going to burn you down. They're going to achieve their win condition, and you're never going to have a chance to really farm these hero powers. But because this has a little bit of damage and has that super strong swing potential, I have a little bit more hope for Brukan. That said, it's still 8 mana, and it still might take a few turns, to get Fire Invocation, for instance, to really start to overwhelm your opponent. So, I sure hope a card like this works. I think this is, so cool, and it'll be very, very fun. And it packs a wall up, right? Any meta that's slightly slower, I think this thing will just absolutely farm people, maybe even to a frustrating degree. We just haven't seen one of those slower metas in a while. So I am incredibly hopeful. I want Brukan to be amazing. It's kind of scary, but I still want him to be amazing because that means we have a slow, grindy meta, and Brukan makes sense in that world. So I am super hopeful for this one. Moving on here to new warrior spell, Frozen Buckler, 2 mana frost spell. Gain 10 armor, and then at the start of your next turn, lose 5 armor. So the ice melts, and you're left with less armor, just the buckler. This is a really cool flavor. Fun card reveal too. And this card's interesting. This is one of the neater designs we've seen in a while because this does a few things. There's a few upsides to this, essentially. Number one, if you're going to use that armor immediately, say with a shield slam, or say you want to hit into a 10-10 minion with your weapon, right? You can just take this armor. You were going to lose it anyway, or you didn't care if you lose it because it's all about activating that shield slam. And this gives you more armor than you would normally get for 2 mana, so you can kind of accelerate whatever shield slam you wouldn't otherwise have been able to do, or tank that damage you wouldn't otherwise have been able to. On top of that, if you're just really in a pinch and you think, oh my god, the opponent's going to kill me next turn, this is sort of like a soft, well, you can't really call it an ice block or a timeout, but essentially it's a 1-turn bonus to your health. It's I just need to get to turn 8. Oh my god, I'm going to win. Or, oh my god, I'm going to stabilize. I have big heals coming on 8. I need that 1 turn, right? And this gives you 5 extra armor during your opponent's turn because it falls off at the start of your next turn. So you can kind of just get by maybe with that 5 if that is the difference maker between life and death. So, there are scenarios where this gives you a real advantage for that temporary armor, which I think is a really fun and interesting design. Now, the downside here is that other times this is just not going to really mean much, right? It's just an extra armor card that didn't make a difference. You would have rather just run like a heavy plate because that just gives you more raw armor and it has like tradable upside. So there are, in essence, more efficient armor cards overall. This one is about like that specific one turn boost. I think decks will just naturally want the more efficient heavy plate instead of this. I don't envision a lot of decks that are willing to run both just because you can't have so many armor cards in your deck. You have to have a little bit of a balance. Typically, we just see like 2 of the big armor card and don't go too far beyond that. It's more about the removal and threats. So can you run all of those together? It's going to be hard for decks to do that, which means I think a lot are just going to prefer heavy plate because that tradable aspect is so valuable. And it's more total armor if you're not like, in a pinch. So are there so many make or break scenarios that Frozen Buckler is worth it over those other armor cards? I kind of doubt it. I think you need a bonus more than just extra armor here. And historically, cards that are just armor without that upside haven't really done as well as cards that have like card draw or something bundled in. So to me, this is a fantastic design. Like I love this card, but I don't think it's going to be good. Next up here is the Popsicle. This is hilariously awesome. And those popsicles look sick. I'd like to get a higher res version of that. It's a 3/3 neutral mech with Death Rattle freeze 2 random enemy minions. And man, reading some thoughts on this card, like people are really mixed. Some of you are out there like, oh, I think it's going to be amazing. And others are like, this card is garbage. It's absolute trash. I have to say I'm leaning a little bit more towards the garbage side of things. I wouldn't go so far as garbage, but I do think this card's actually going to be fairly awkward because it's a Death Rattle effect, and that makes this card really passive. You play it down in anticipation of this Death Rattle freeze being relevant on a future turn. Like, sure, there are some ways to activate it. Like we saw some rogue Death Rattle-y stuff that might be more possible. But generally, you're just playing it in anticipation, which does a couple things. It gives your opponent like the luxury of decision making. Like maybe they just clear it instead of playing something big that would be a ripe freeze target for the Popsicle, or just like play rush minions where they get a little value out of it and they don't mind if it's frozen. They already got something done, or play Battlecry minions that are more about the Battlecry effect than the stats. So you're kind of giving them all this luxury. On top of that, if they're already ahead and they have threats down and you play this, they're just potentially going to ignore it. This just keep hitting you in the face and enacting their game plan, and it's going to take you a whole nother turn for the Popsicle to actually make a significant difference. And even then, it's just freezing 2 random enemy minions. It might be hard to trigger the Death Rattle. They have a board full of 2/2s. Now, screw me. I can't kill the Popsicle without sinking even more into this effect. And then, maybe the freezes aren't even good. It freezes their 1/1s instead of their 5/5. So I just got all these ways like, oh my God, there's just like 8 different ways for this card to not work all that well, both from game state standpoint and the randomness of the effect. When I think about like Flurry, which is basically this effect as the Death Rattle, at least a 5-mana Flurry, I'm like, oh yeah, Flurry's great because it's 0 mana. It sets up all these other things. It's your Frost spell. Like, it's great. This is, Flurry on a stick, and the stick is not exciting, and the Flurry is delayed. So I think the potential for disruption and friction on this card is not nearly high enough to kind of pay off the risk of having to drop this and hope for the best. So for me, I think this card just doesn't get there for most decks. Death Rattle synergies or anything else. It's just, there's going to be better options. Moving on here to the Sacrificial Summoner for Warlock, a 3-mana 3/3 with Battlecry. Destroy a friendly minion and summon a minion from your deck that costs 1 more. So you got some more like egg synergy stuff in Warlock. We've seen quite a few of these cards keep getting printed. We have a few like Death Rattle and egg style things happening in Warlock where, you play a Bone Web egg, you drop a Sacrificial Summoner, you get a couple 2/1s, and it also summons you a 3-drop from your deck. Would be the sort of perfect curve for this one if you're looking for aggression. In some ways, that makes the Sacrificial Summoner actually kind of bad because it could summon itself. That's not terrible, right? 2 3/3s and a Death Rattle activation for a Rubian Egg or Bone Web Egg or whatever it is. Could be a pretty strong early game tempo play. That said, if you don't hit exactly that curve, I think this guy finds a lot of awkward board states where it's like, I actually already played my Death Rattles. They've already been resolved. And I got to kill my own minion. And it's like, it's okay. I can take a value trade and summon something bigger from my deck. But If you're playing that like a zoo deck, like what's the top end result? How good is it going to get to as you start adding higher and higher costs up? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe the stuff I'm using as a follow up in zoo decks is often like more about the battle cry or about the follow up as opposed to like the raw stats. It's like, there's awkwardness there from a deck building standpoint. And then I do think there's one angle for this card that's more intriguing because you can kind of control what's getting summoned. There might be scenarios where you could use this as like a tutor of sorts, but an on-board tutor where you have some like, very specific thing in your deck you want to make sure that you find or create some chain. Like, I'm going to do this on a 4-drop to make sure that Talon gets summoned, to make sure that I find, whatever big crazy card I care about, my Archwitch Willow, whatever. These aren't great examples because I don't think there are any right now, but that's one like really niche use case of this card that I wouldn't totally sleep on, is the ability to pull things out of your deck to some degree could actually be really powerful. Or, cards with like a big downside on the battle cry that you don't really want to play, but you might still want to summon into play. Maybe you could use a card like this to cheat them out. So there are absolutely use cases for this one, but I think there are still just some awkwardness around, the best curve fit for this is kind of a downfall. You got to build your deck very specifically for it. It's going to be dead in hand sometimes or punishing in hand, all of which probably limit Sacrificial Summoner's success. Brukan of the Elements is a 4-star card. Frozen Buckler is a 2-star card. Popsicle is a 2-star card. Sacrificial Summoner is a 3-star card. And there you go, folks. That is it for this particular review. Always cool to see these hero cards. Brukan looks like so much fun, dude. I can't wait to play this one. As long as it's not Dr. Boom Mad Genius Part 2, but without the like Rush Elemental stuff or Rush Mech stuff, I think it'll be fine. So share your thoughts on all these cards. I think the designs on all of these are really good, by the way. Power level, of course, is going to vary, but these look like 4 really fun cards, frankly, even if they're not good. They seem to have a lot of flavor and fun mechanics. So excited to see these, but share your thoughts. Look forward to that. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.